Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass, episode 6. Tonight we'll be discussing people vanishing in our national parks and the possibility of aliens being the cause. I know a very weird and controversial topic there, but you'll see here tonight some of these stories, they just don't add up. Lucy, would you like to start us out on this topic? I think there was something to do with a smiley face murder gang or something she wanted to discuss.
Sure. So the smiley face murder theory is just a theory that these two cops came up with a couple of decades ago, and I don't think it's still really continued on today in terms of investigation. There's been official people coming out and trying to disprove it, but these cops had theorized that 45 or more murders were committed by one or multiple people. And the reason why they thought this is because they were all under similar circumstances, where it was a young college student who had drowned, who was taking alcohol before the drowning, and who was to be a successful person,
Mm-hmm.
and handsome, that kind of a persona.
Yeah.
So the reason why they connected all these different what were believed to be just accidental deaths to be thought as murder is that in 21 locations, I believe, there were smiley faces near where they found the bodies. And in some of the cases, the bodies were found in weird positions. One of the bodies was found in a river in a sheet of ice 2 months later, standing upwards with his hands crossed over his chest.
Really? So, like, there's like a
Yes.
ritualistic component to these murders.
Possibly. And also, there were about 8 or 9 different instances where, in addition to a smiley face, there was a word translating to rattlesnake in a Native American language painted nearby also. So this is another point of evidence.
Interesting. So,
Yeah, the
go ahead, Slag.
I was going to say that it does seem like I'm not a professional, but I would guess that it's probably someone kind of carrying on a quote unquote message.
Would you be talking like
Sadly,
copycat killers?
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is could be like copycats, Instagram guys.
Yeah, that's the main problem I see with this particular case is that, it is possible that when the majority of these murders happens or believed murders, there was a serial killer out there, killing men who we had a problem with or something like that. But I do find it highly unlikely that that same guy, if he existed, is still out there today. And I do think that, in today it would be something like the copycat murder thing where, somebody who's going to murder somebody decides to paint a smiley face near the scene of the murder, just to keep the conspiracy going.
Well, yeah, definitely for the notoriety. When it comes to this definitely sounds like human on human action. Either a coincidence that the maybe not murders at all, maybe just young men on alcohol drowning or foul play, but this seems to be a very human element. I don't really feel like there's much room to interpret supernatural causes or a conspiracy in that case.
Yeah, I mean, all of the men beforehand, were drunk,
Yeah, they're
that,
all pretty vulnerable.
yeah.
Young party goers, I believe.
Well, it seems interesting to me that this is men, young men. Usually, when there's like a target demographic, it's young women. So that's very interesting. That would lead me to believe that maybe this was a person with a motive doing these things. People that
Well,
like
they
serial
had
killers. Go ahead.
Donner and Gacy. I mean, they targeted men. They targeted like boys and males when they were doing their serial killing.
Yeah, definitely. But you just don't really see
So
that much anymore. It seems like it's usually like killing young women or young children, not men in their prime. The prime target that you would see that would fight back. You see a lot of these serial killers. There's a lot of sexual motivation or cowardice. they go after the weak prey. They don't go after the strong prey, you know?
Well, I mean, if you go after the strong prey when they're drunk, that's a different thing, I guess. I guess that's the whole theory behind it, is that it's somebody or multiple people who the person was envious or jealous of. And the reason they think that it was multiple murderers more likely than one person is that there were some deaths which happened under similar circumstances in different states at the same, like during the same day. So that's why they
Yeah.
believe it could be like a cult or like multiple murderers.
Hmm.
If they are murders.
Okay.
Who even knows what that really looks like now? I mean, we know about the parody of the cults and that sort of stuff, but we don't really understand, I think, as laymen, what it could really look like nowadays. It could be very pretty looking with a lot of suits and
So this
like
is saying
positions in the
that
business.
this is as recent as 2008, but this was mostly perpetrated in the 1990s and before.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was one person who also fit the criteria of who met the criteria of a smiley face being painted nearby and being drowned. I believe in 2004, or maybe it was 2014. There was like one or two recent ones, but the 40 or so that consisted of the majority of this theory were 10 or 20 years ago.
Well, that sounds like it's active period. That sounds like when the cult or the person or whatever was doing this was active. And I would say if you have a few pop up, you know, 10, 20 years after the fact, that's definitely copycats.
Yeah, I mean at that point I would think it's just an urban legend. I think
Yeah,
it's
or
stupid to.
coincidence, something like that. But I mean,
Yeah.
as far as like a coincidence, man, 40 people being murdered in a short period of time and having the same, motive and imagery around the killings, that sounds pretty there's actually when we're getting to our another topic, coincidence is just when you can't see the pulleys and levers. You know what I mean? When you just can't
Yeah,
see what's going on. That's what we call a coincidence. Everything's related in some way. We just can't really see how it's all working.
in this case, the two cops who were investigating it were so convinced that it was true and that this really was going on and that their theory was correct that they even put mortgages on their houses, sold their houses and their own possessions to continue their investigation. I don't think it's still ongoing.
Yeah.
That passion's hard to fake.
Well, yeah, I mean, and we're going to be going into David Palladius, or however you pronounce his last name, the one that
It's
did the. Go ahead.
It's David Paulides.
Pallades?
That's how you
Okay.
say it. I think that's how you say his name.
But he has the same passion. He was he had a lot of background in law enforcement as a detective, and when he was he says that a high-ranking government official presented him with these cases, and then he started talking to park rangers and special detectives in the park ranger force and the national parks, and he said it was like a conviction that once he started looking into these cases, he just couldn't shake it, and it became like his life's journey to study these things and write books about them and bring them to the media's attention, and that's been going on for a
All
long
those
time
cold
now.
cases, yeah.
Yeah, just like I mean, like you said, that's a drive you can't fake. Like that's definitely real. Whether what he's speaking about is right or wrong or real, that's definitely a real drive.
It is amazing the amount of people that die within our national parks. I remember when I was at the Grand Canyon, I was in their bookstore looking at a book of like, I forget the exact number. It was something like 2,000, deaths in the Grand Canyon, like of every different kind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this the thing about the people vanishing in our national parks is people disappear every day, but a large percentage of them are found. But in these cases, not only do they share similar things, like archetypes to the people disappearing, and they're clustered in certain spaces, but they're never found, not a trace. And when they bring dogs out to look for them, the dogs just act dumbfounded. They just like follow the trail. They'll just sit there and just give up. There's nothing for them to track. And just like, especially when the children go missing, they'll have it where when the children are found, they've traversed great distances that would be, it's impossible for them to go that distance barefoot through rugged terrain, or ending up in places where they couldn't get without expert climbing gear. Like there was a case where a couple had come down from a mountain and they were looking through the binoculars and they saw a little boy up on top of a cliff head looking down at them waving, and they just thought, bad parenting. Well, they got down off the mountain, they went home, and when they were going home, there was a bunch of people there looking for something, and they never thought anything of it. Well, they went home, saw on the news that that same little boy had went missing, and he went missing in the valley. He went
Oh
missing down
wow.
on the ground.
Yeah,
And,
no, that'd be pretty spooky.
yeah, and they never
Or they
found
had a
him.
case where a little girl came back, and I guess she was very, very calm about the ordeal, being missing for like 4 days.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've heard about that case that Slag Nasty is talking about. It's a case where a little girl was with her family, I believe, and she went missing for about a week. And when they found her, she was perfectly fine, physically and mentally, and psychologically. She was just like, like, hey guys, like, here I am. It didn't seem like the time passed in her mind because
yeah.
she was gone for a whole week.
Well, there was a
And they found her in a
girl
cave.
that went missing, and when they found her, she was acting like really like out of it, but she was in perfect good health and all that. And then she'd been missing for like 2 or 3 days, and all that she could really say about the time that she was gone is that the sun never set, that it was daylight the whole entire 3 day span she was missing. So what we're seeing here is definitely temporal disturbances, whether they're in the minds of the people that are disappearing or if they're actually part of their reality. But we're seeing temporal disturbances. We're seeing time and space disturbances, people moving great distances without the ability to do so, whether that be up or down or, forward and backwards. Also, we're seeing where people are, they always say in these cases, he was right next to me. Like, literally, he walked around a tree and he's gone. That's impossible.
That's the aspect of it which I find the most fascinating. Because if you look at a case where a guy's all by his lonesome walking through a national park, it makes sense that, he gets heat exhaustion, his brain goes a little bit funny, maybe he gets lost and dies, maybe he disappears or goes crazy. But when there's, like there's this one example of a story where this guy who was an experienced hiker and outdoorsman was camping with a few of his friends, and they went out to go bike riding. And he said, I'll just stay here. I just want to rest up. Well, when they came back, he wasn't there, and there was absolutely no sign of him leaving. There was no tracks or anything. And they, hundreds of volunteers, spent a couple of days looking for him, and they found nothing.
Yeah, and there's also been cases, and this is another weird thing about this, is they'll find these people where they've already looked. Like they'll go through and they'll find them. Like they'll search an area for 4 days, and they'll be like, go out the next morning to search, and they'll find them on the trail they've been walking every day to go look for them. It's crazy. Yeah, maybe they stepped into a portal of some sort. I mean, maybe that they're as much in our reality as they are in another reality, and that's why we're not finding anything. These things are definitely possible. And I mean, when it comes to something like this, you try to go through every logical explanation that you can, but sooner or later, on something of this scale, you just run out of logic for it. This is not this takes logic, chews it up, and spits it right back at you.
I,
It's just
I
too
would
big.
have to agree. I mean, now I'm one of the first people to say that I think there's usually logical explanation for what's going on. Discussed it before. It could be they're not prepared, freak animal occurrence, but it is starting to look very strange.
Yeah,
These I can understand people disappearing from accidents, but it's the guys that seem to come back, or they just disappear without a trace. They're right, they're gone 1 second after you're looking at them. You know, it gets kind of spooky.
Well, I mean, you got to understand these cases that we're talking about are excluding the cases of people being mauled by animals or people, having a mental illness. These cases that we're looking at are where they've done their best humanly to rule out these other factors, these other criteria that would say,
Well,
that
I
you can
mean,
logically explain.
if you're not going to go with the accepted, like the mainstream explanations, then you have to start kind of looking at other ones that are stranger and less, quote unquote, less mainstream.
Hmm.
They may not be as accepted, even though it could be what is happening.
Well, I mean, you
I
never
guess
know, man. Just because something isn't accepted in the mainstream definitely doesn't mean that it's not true.
these are very quiet. These can be very quiet places. You had mentioned it to me earlier before we started. These secluded areas. So
Yeah.
anything's really possible there. I mean, this is zero population. You're literally the only human in the valley. You know what I mean? That's a situation not a lot of us get into
I mean, there's been in these cases.
outside of urban.
I mean, like, get this for creepy. There was this one old woman that went missing in Australia in a park, and she was an avid hiker, hiked the area all the time, and she called the 911 there and was all like, "I need your help right now," and then just like the signal cut out, and they went to her location, and they heard her yelling for help, but they couldn't find her, and they never did.
I mean, these parks were inspired to be saved, these lands by some of our presidents. They were great conservationists.
Hmm.
And I know that Teddy Roosevelt was one of them. And then but you have to start wondering, like, how untouched, how quiet are these places? And
I
this is
find,
just the natural beauty.
I mean,
They've certainly found resources there.
I find it really interesting that still to this day, and what a world, what a country we live in, what a world we live in. That still 14% of the land area of the United States is protected, and of that, 3.4% of that is national. That's pretty significant.
Yeah.
I think it's fortunate that we have because there's like old wood is okay, you know.
Hmm.
These forests should be around in these different areas, like those colorful rocks, the rock formations in Utah. Like there's a cave out there that's famous. I'd hate to see something horrible happen to something like that.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely not advocating that we would, do anything
Burn it all
rational.
down. Burn it all down.
Yeah, I don't think we should burn it all down, but I definitely think that we need to look into these issues. And I mean, of course, they're beautiful places. I mean, you should definitely go visit them, but make sure you walk arm in arm. You know what I mean? Make sure that you're with at least five other people and you tape
I
yourselves
think the
together.
common, I think a common thread too is just you should be prepared. When you go out hiking, you should bring something warm. You should always have enough water, and some sort of food with you. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, so you should plan to eat and drink out there, and always take a knife or something like a formidable knife. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to weigh you down.
Yeah.
And some of the heartbreaking stories are the guys that like leave their phone behind.
Oh,
You know, they leave their phone and then go for a run and then they're gone.
that's absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, if I was gonna go,
So that is a
but I think what people don't get about this is like they don't see it as venturing into the wilderness. They see it as I'm going on a hike. Like I remember that like when I lived in a like I used to live in a place that had hiking trails, and I never took my phone or anything. I mean, I just went to go hiking. I'd usually take a blunt, go out there, smoke a little weed on the trail, and come home. And I mean, these trails went deep out in the woods, but I never really worried about it. I mean, I never really saw it as, I mean, an issue. I mean, I guess that's because it was more in an area where I knew that if I just kept walking straight, I was eventually going to reach civilization. You know what I mean? Maybe if I walked for like
I
an
just
hour.
follow two. two simple rules, but I think Snug was going to say something.
I was just gonna ask Flav if the area where you walked, if there was a river that ran through there.
Oh, definitely, definitely, yeah.
Because I mean that's the smart thing is to follow water. But if you're just walking straight in a line, there's a lot of cases of people who said, okay, I'm just gonna walk straight and eventually I'll get somewhere. And their right foot or their left foot is their dominant foot. So if they're walking a small percentage more to the right every single time that they take a step, over hours and days, they actually end up walking in circles.
Oh, definitely. What I was referring to is the places that I went where they weren't. You could definitely get a feeling of being lost in the wilderness and nobody being around, but you would be very foolhardy to get lost and die in these areas. You know what I mean? If you're able to move about and you can't find your way out of it, then you fucked up a long time ago, buddy. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Well, yeah,
dude.
but sometimes those people do go to parks, Flav, and they enjoy it, even if they're completely unqualified.
Well,
Like
that's
as far
that's
as
just a
like basic,
Darwin
like
award right there, to be quite honest with you. I mean, if I was ever gonna actually go,
everyone can enjoy nature.
yeah, you can't outsmart nature. I mean, you gotta be prepared. If I was ever gonna go hiking like Yosemite or a national park, I would definitely not do it alone. I would bring survival gear and a firearm if I could. And also, what that guy David talks about is bringing a locator. So if you ever go missing, you just hit it, goes to a satellite, and they can find within eight
Yeah,
feet
they're
of where you are.
beacons.
What'd you say?
I You want to go
Uh,
ahead, Slick?
I was gonna say that yeah, they have beacons.
Yeah.
Sometimes those get used, like hikers will use them because they forgot their pack of smokes or whatever. Or,
What?
so it's a lot of times a lot of times they'll have like the rescue beacon, to give the signal to the local rangers that they need help, and it's not always like a real emergency. It's like you wanted water, like next time carry water for you and your
Yeah.
two dogs, So, but yeah, you definitely have to be prepared. So
For me, I think it's about balance because I think it's okay to have some, human adventure and almost putting yourself in a dangerous situation to feel the epicness of nature. Uh, but at the same time, there are, your idiots that I remember one time I was in Yellowstone National Park and there was this guy walking around the park and he was standing around this geyser and this park ranger walked by and he said, "Excuse me, but can you drink this water? I know it's hot, but can you
What?
drink it?" And the park ranger was like, "Well, you can do what you want, but we found traces of poisonous bacteria, arsenic, iron, lead in this water. So that's your
at
decision."
least the guy asked
Where do
professional.
these? What kind of rocks do these people crawl out from under, man? Like really? Like, can I drink the
Ah,
hot spring water at Yellowstone National Park?
It was like 1,000 degree water, dude.
Yeah,
Like,
I know it's a little warm, but do you sell any of this at the gift shop, buddy? Like, can I take a bath in Old Faithful when she blows? Like, what
man,
what
this
are
one
these
I
people doing, dude?
prefer to do it like secluded, even with friends, do it away from other people. But
Yeah,
I can see the charm of like the tours and just the general public acting up. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna go out camping or what have you. I'm gonna be prepared and I'm gonna take charge of whatever happens.
yeah. Well, I think the
Because
problem
I do
is,
enjoy the peace and quiet, and like the mountains a lot.
I think a lot of the problem is people in today's society, they get this sense of false security, like nothing can go wrong. Because I remember when I was a kid, 14 years old, and we went camping. I don't really feel like my parents ever took any precautions. We went out, we went up to the campsite, we set up, and whether there were 20 other trailers there or nobody, and we were the only RV, we just kind of did our thing, and like we'd run off in the woods, not knowing where we were, as kids, go play in the creeks, and I mean, I guess we were lucky to make it home, but we never worried
I mean,
about that.
these discussions like this, though, this is why it lends me doubts to a more supernatural or alien element. Since we're talking about parks, you
Hmm.
know, that's just kind of the anchor for me. Is I'd need to look into it more. That's why I'm glad we're going to be revisiting this
Yeah,
uh,
definitely. We
next week,
actually
I
came to this
believe.
topic on very short notice, so we will actually be revisiting this in about a week in depth. So be ready for that. That's going to be very interesting. Tonight we're just talking about disappearances at large and kind of, getting you ready, warming you up on the subject so you can do your own research at home and have something to talk to us about. We want this to be interactive, guys. We want you to interact with us in chat. That would be great. But as far as like just the general way that people treat nature, they don't respect it. And I mean, I can say they don't respect. I mean, I didn't when I was younger. Reading about something like this though definitely makes you respect nature.
Well, there's still, at least to us, what are unknown. That kind of goes back to my point of the national parks. Is it's very nice that, as Snug said, we have 14%, but why were these areas specifically chosen? Besides the obvious ones with the landmarks.
Well,
Just to
obviously
clarify,
because go ahead.
14% is protected area, like a forest and stuff. Only 3.4% is actually a national park, which is maintained, with trails and stuff. Just
Yeah.
So it's pretty small even then. So I don't know. I mean, I still think it's just mostly the human element, but the time warp, like where distance doesn't seem to matter,
Hmm.
or it just gets real quiet all of a sudden. I mean, I don't know how much you guys have been in forest, but I've always had that one asshat, especially if you're doing like the buddy system who just disappears. And you're
yeah, I've
like,
had some stories in
immediately
the
you're like,
forest. It's,
okay, I'm now alone. And you're
I'm
looking
now
around
alone
you
and
and the
at
trees,
danger.
and the trees are just, looking back at you. So then they come out and all as well. So you can do a lot of damage if you panic. It's
Yeah.
always good to stay calm as
Well,
far
yeah,
as
I
if you
remember
have an
one
upset.
time, me and my friend, this was it had just snowed, everything was frozen over, and we just went venturing out into the wilderness, and we didn't have our phones on us, we didn't have anything, man. We had a jacket, and that was it. We just went, we had marijuana, but that's my survival tool in the wilderness is we
Oh,
went
you had the
out.
marijuana.
Yeah, dude. I
Surprised you
mean,
didn't run into Jason Voorhees.
yeah, you run into Jason Voorhees. Yeah, you'll get out of it alive, man. I mean, aliens, dude, they're afraid of dope smoke. That's how you ward them off. But we were out there, and actually, we found ourselves in a predicament. We were God knows how far away from home, and we had to jump across a ravine. That I guess you'd call it a ravine. It was like a little gap in the earth, and there was water running through it. Lake, whatever you want to call it. And he made it across. Well, me being, I definitely didn't win a Darwin Award that day, but my leg broke the water's surface, and up to like my thigh on my right leg got submerged in water. And we're in freezing temperatures here, so it became a race to get home before I got frostbitten. And that was actually it turned scary really quick, and we started panicking because all of a sudden what was just a stroll through the woods and the snow turned into my leg is freezing, and like I could feel it, like it was painful. It was
Yeah, no, I
definitely interesting.
understand if there's some sort of trauma.
Yeah,
I think it's good to be that guy, who's just someone's got to be calm,
yeah,
and even if you're the one that's in pain, it sometimes falls on the injured person to be the calm one.
yeah.
They'll definitely be better off for it.
Well, what we ended up doing is we ended up actually just jumping back across the ravine and just going back the way we came, and we were able to get back within about 30 minutes. And I mean, by that time, my leg was solid numb. It was
Let's,
bad, but it was fine.
let's. I say we just settle what we think about the national parks and these disappearances in as a point of reference for next time.
Yeah,
So I feel that you've already heard mine I'm going to stick with the rational, just plain vanilla human element. It could have been an accident, an animal, that sort of thing.
I
That's where I'm going to be
believe
approaching this. And
that
then
it
obviously a
is.
staffing issue.
Yeah, I believe it
What
is
about you guys?
interdimensional, demonic, extraterrestrial, shape shifting animals.
You're going with the shotgun approach on the paranormal angle.
Yeah, definitely.
Sound.
What did you
How about
just
you, Snow?
mutter? What?
I said sound.
Sound.
That sound, as in like argumentatively like logical. You know.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a sound theory.
So we got two for logic and one for demonic aliens.
I think if you are going the side of, oh, well, what if there's wormholes in these national parks, or oh, what if there's aliens and stuff? I think it's important to only focus on the cases in which there really isn't any evidence of a disappearance or a suicide or a murder
You're
or an
talking about
attack
the
of any.
obvious, quote
Because
unquote,
if you're trying to tie it into hundreds and hundreds of people and the government and stuff, it gets a little bit wishy-washy. But with the certain instances, such as that guy who disappeared when he went with his few friends and they couldn't find anything, I think those are fascinating.
Well, I mean,
could
I'm just gonna
be
go ahead and
some sort
say
of
I'm not saying is it interdimensional demonic alien shapeshifters.
You're saying it is.
I'm saying how many are there and where are they
that
coming
are.
from? Yeah. I mean, I've been
It's
looking
a
into
tie.
this for a long
If
time,
something
man.
strange is happening, I think it's a tiny number. Because if
Tiny
it was a
number.
huge number of people, yeah, if it was a large number of people, a large percentage, then there'd be much more outroar.
Hmm.
Maybe it's small, isolated cases, or cherry picked people, or just victims of crime. Like some of the more occult ones, like that's what occult means is like mysterious. You
Yeah.
know, it's arcane or spooky in some way. It doesn't necessarily mean it's supernatural. It's just strange.
And also, we were gonna do a bit on aliens tonight, but actually, my friend that was going to talk about it with me, that was there during my experience, I think had to work over today. So when we revisit this subject, we'll try to get him on and we'll go through that. But just as far as aliens goes, how do you guys feel about aliens?
I had an experience when I was a little kid, and I'd chalk it up to a UFO experience. I'd say it's more likely that it was a drone. But what happened was I was probably about 12, 13, and I went outside to take out the trash. And this thing was probably a few thousand feet in the air. I don't know if you've ever played Star Wars Battlefront or any games like that, but a frigate, you know what that is? That's what it reminded me of, because it was just this really weird shaped ship. It was not a plane. It was not a helicopter. It seemed kind of flat. And, it probably was just a drone, just casually
Hmm.
the FBI spying on us. But this thing was pretty low to the ground, and it made no noise whatsoever. Whatever. I mean, that's not English, but it didn't make any noise. And it was just this giant thing flying over with a few lights on it.
I mean, I'll go ahead and
So
tell you right
that's,
now that I saw a thunderbird when I was a kid. Have you ever
that's
heard
just,
of the Native American thunderbird?
no.
It's
I've
a
heard of it, but only in fiction. Because like I like
yeah.
Shadowrun for
Like I 100% swear on everything I hold dear. I was like 9 years old, man, and I remember it like it happened yesterday. So I walk out of my garage. I still remember smelling the rain and the dirt. The smell you get after it rains. It was after a huge storm. The clouds are parting in the sky. The sun's shining through, and in between the clouds, I see this giant bird. I'm talking bigger than so much bigger than a plane. And it's high up there. It was huge, immaculate, a thing of beauty, man. And that stuck with me for my whole life, man. Like it was crazy. If you've ever seen Ho Ho for Pokemon, that's what it looked like in some way. It was absolutely insane.
Well, do you guys have any? You guys want to talk about stories from our about weird
Well,
experiences we've had,
I
or?
mean, you guys were discussing aliens. I just want to say that, I think as a kid, you got outside a lot. Like, I have had my share of, like, spooky situations. And even into my, like, early adult, early 20s, it's like I feel that there were certain times where it was a little strange, off putting. I didn't feel right about a person, what have you. So
Yeah.
I myself, I do believe in the existence of like aliens. I think that they are true aliens. Like, for lack of a better way to put it, just kind of like I follow kind of Michael Crichton's alien uh, philosophy. Where it's like they could just be like a bag of like arsenic gas.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe if people are, falling prey to an alien force, like, good luck to them, because I have a feeling it would be, we tend to anthropomorphize things we don't understand when they could just be completely alien and,
Yeah.
mentally. So if
Uh,
they, that's what I believe in. I don't believe in like the XCOM style where they're scooping people up with UFOs or what have you.
Kathy said, "Are you in the CIA slag?" And she said she missed you last night. So are you
Oh,
denying these
yeah, sorry
claims
about that.
because you're in the
I
CIA? Are you part of the cover up? Are you part of the globalist
Well, let's
conspiracy?
just say that I missed yesterday's podcast because of work.
Oh, okay.
Word.
Oh yeah, we got
So
you.
I've made my apologies to everyone, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's good to be on. But like I was saying, that's what I think about the aliens. So
All right.
as far as stories go, maybe next time. One doesn't spring to mind for now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a paranormal experience, and my friend was there with me. And I don't really. The only thing that I can talk about that happened paranormally that I can't have somebody say I saw it too was the Thunderbird. I was 100% alone, and I was very young, but I 100% believe in what I saw. And for another one, I mean, we'll get into the aliens experience another time when my friend's able to come on and talk about it with me because he saw the exact same thing. But I was over at my friend's house and we were smoking weed because we always, I mean, like, I would say that my experience, if I told you I saw ghosts,
So we'll start.
if I would say if I ever told you that I saw ghosts and I was like I wasn't smoking weed, then you could maybe think that I was making it up or that maybe I was having withdrawal effects. But all my stories are about smoking weed. So we're over at my friend's house. He lived in a really old house, man, and I'm smoking a blunt. I pass it to my boy, and then we're both just like kind of like really high, looking out through the door of the room, and there's a hallway, and at the other end of the hallway there's a closet that's open. Well, all of a sudden we just see like this like mist like just like materialize and go down the hallway and fly into the closet and disappear. And so I look over at my boy and I'm like, "Yo, dude, your dog's acting crazy, man." And he's like, "I don't have a dog." I was like, "Cat?" He's like, "I don't have a cat." And then my friend instantly just turned like white as a ghost and looked at me. I was like, "Bro, you saw that shit?" And I was like, "Hell yeah, I saw that shit." And like we just dipped, bro. I was like, "Bro, it was good seeing you, man. We got to get the fuck out of here." Like it was just like one of those primal feelings. Like I just saw something I shouldn't have. You know, it was
Yeah,
scary.
I enjoyed that scene in The Matrix myself too, with the deja vu. Deja vu is another one that's interesting.
Man,
I've got one story kind of like that from my childhood. Is there anything, any more points you want to make before I
no,
talk about
definitely.
mine?
No,
I'd
I'm
love to
not
hear
gonna
it.
interrupt you.
Sure. So, I was talking about this a little bit to Favosky earlier. I didn't go in depth at all, but I was telling him sometimes when I talk about this or mention it to people, I start to tear up a little bit because I feel like as a child it almost traumatized me. But there were a few times, and one in particular, which I have a memory of, when I was probably 10 or younger, maybe 8, I'm not sure. And what would happen is I would go in my garage. Um, the one time I'm thinking of, it was nighttime, and I went in there, and everything was perfectly calm. Everything was perfectly still. There was no wind or anything. And I went in there and I was in the garage. I have a fairly big garage, probably 20 feet by 30 feet. And both doors, the back door and the front door, slammed shut at the same time, like full on slam shut.
Really?
And I was freaking the fuck out, you know?
Yeah.
And like I'm getting chills right now just thinking about that. And that happened a couple of times. So what ended up happening was my mom would, I would come home from my friend's house at nighttime. My mom picked me up and I'd put my bike in her trunk. And she'd say, "Go put your bike away." And I would, I would be like, "Mom, I'm scared of the dark. I'm scared of the garage. I don't want to do that." And she's like, "Bullshit. Go do it anyway." So I would sprint to the garage, open the door just a crack, throw my bike in, and slam that door shut.
Yeah.
I avoided that shit for years.
Well, I mean, there's definitely something to be said about children's fear of the dark. And also, if you subscribe to like demons and aliens, they always in the supernatural, they always say that kids are more receptive to these things. And I mean, I can definitely sympathize with you. When I was a kid, whenever I was alone, especially at night, like you always felt like there was something right behind you. Did you not? You always felt like if you looked into a dark room, you could see something moving in it. You know? Like just like
I
always
was,
right around the corner, waiting to get you. And as you grow up, you
I
kind of grow out of that. But as a kid, that was very real, man.
It was really real. I mean, I could not sleep. I was up till 2 or 3 a.m. almost every night, because I would see like say a sweatshirt in dark in my room, and I would just look at it for an hour, and then an hour later I'm thinking, is this thing an alien or whatever? And obviously that's a childish thing to think. But that's really real fear, and you wonder where that comes from.
But is it really a childish fear? Because is there a chance that maybe children pick up on things that adults don't? I mean, you always hear about these stories of children having imaginary friends, and sometimes they tell them to do bad things. Maybe these aren't imaginary characters. Maybe these are real things, real evil spirits, evil, celestial energy trying to manifest in a young child's life. I mean, I'm not saying I have evidence to support it. I'm just saying that I believe
That
in
would
the
be the stuff of
supernatural.
more studies.
What'd you say?
That would be that would be that would be something that you'd want to look into. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, when you get into something like that, it's just like God. I can't prove to you God exists. I can't prove to you he doesn't. But there's a feeling you get when you look into these things, and that's my gut feeling on it. You know what I mean? I feel like there is real evil in this world that is not human.
For me, it's just always been the primal emotion, which I've been invoked, like fear and stuff. Like mostly as a child, not so much now. That's why it's always stuck with me as something to think about, as opposed to other beliefs.
Hmm.
I do think there's a cosmic evil like that drives people and tempts them. The You just mentioned the children as far as being sensitive. I remember I used to did a lot of reading on something called the Akashic records, and those are like supposedly like a psychic archive of like mankind's experiences, and it's kind of like
Yeah. It's
around
also the name
you.
of an anime.
But they went into they did very few studies on like sleep and the
Hmm.
electromagnetic field around the planet. They've done very few of them, and it's usually the same people. But it's an interesting thing. There are studies out there for almost anything, so you have to look at them carefully and see, what's behind them too. Who knows? I think that thing with the children is something that maybe they should study more because they're equipped to survive. Like even though they're pretty helpless, like physically they can mimic a lot of like every sound that any language on the planet can make.
Yeah.
According to psych. So they are equipped to survive in certain ways. So they may be hyper aware or just more aware of different different things. Maybe we don't consider it a priority because we're grown up, but to them that shadow or whatever looks weird. You know.
Yeah.
I think for children, I've always found it interesting. Like for me as a child, like I was talking about seeing aliens at night. It was always like if I slept with my parents, that would go away. There was always like this fear, and if I was with other people, it would go away for the most.
Well, I mean, when we start looking into rational explanations for some of these things, sleep paralysis definitely comes up. And also, I don't know if you've ever suffered from this, but exploding head syndrome. I've suffered from
Can
both of
you
those.
explain exploding head syndrome?
Yeah, okay. So let me do the sleep paralysis experience I had is where I was actually like I'd stayed up for like a day and a half. I was really tired. So cuz I was just like having like really bad dreams at the time. So I went to sleep and I was just laying there. I was like drifting off and I just kind of like came to and my whole body was like lead. Like I couldn't move it. I knew I was in sleep paralysis cuz I'd studied this stuff. I knew about it. I used to be a very avid lucid dreamer and I used to just trick my body into going to sleep so I could lucid dream. I've done that a
I
lot.
do like my dreams. I believe that dreams can hold some importance. I
Yeah.
suppose that's kind of a pop out, but I've never kept a dream journal, but I do.
Oh,
I
I
actually suffer from sleep paralysis pretty consistently, and I don't always know why, but it's some of the worst fear that's provoked in me afterwards. And like you were saying how some of these paranormal type things can be chalked up to that. I would
yeah.
agree 100% because there was one time I was having sleep paralysis, and like you said, it was the same thing. I knew I was having sleep paralysis, and I was maybe in it for 5 or 10 minutes. But I swear to God, I felt like somebody was coming down the stairs to kill me, and I could
Yeah.
hear them.
Well, I mean, I wasn't finished with my story, but I'm glad you chimed in because I want to say I used to do what's called wild wake induced lucid dreaming, which is where you would keep a dream journal, you would do reality checks. What I always did is I would take my finger and I would try to push it through the palm of my hand. And I did that multiple times every day. And one night I did it in my dream and my finger went through my hand. And that was my first lucid
Ooh,
dream. That was the first time that I was all like, I'm dreaming. And usually, your first time, you're in a state of shock, so you wake up. But after that, when I would push my finger through my palm, I was like, okay, let's go. And dude, I've had some of the greatest experiences lucid dreaming from that. And also, the real crazy one is wake induced lucid dreaming, which is where you get comfortable, you lay down, you close your eyes, and you just breathe. You just breathe naturally, and what you'll feel is you'll start to get sleepy, but you don't let your mind go to sleep. You trick your body into going to sleep, but you keep your mind awake. And you'll feel it feels like a lead blanket going over your body. And that's the sleep paralysis kicking in. And you'll hear things and you'll swear that things are touching you or whispering in your ear, but it's all just part of going to sleep. It's hypnog. I think it's I can't remember the word for it, but it's like hypnog hip I can't I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but it's a hallucination and it's perfectly normal. And your body even hurts sometimes or feel like something bites you. And it's all just your body trying to make sure that you're asleep before it locks you down for the night and makes it where you can't move. And if you can go through all that, you'll have complete control over what your dream world is. And I've done it before. It's absolutely amazing. But
I'd love to look into that.
you should definitely give it a try. Now, that is very mentally stressful. All you need to do to lucid dream is keep a dream journal and do the reality check. Put your index finger through the palm of your hand. Do that like 30, 40 times a day. Sooner or later, you're going to do it in your sleep and it's going to go right through, my dude. And you'll be like, "Wow, I'm asleep." You know?
So
that's interesting. Check
why I
out.
said that I would want to look into that is because I had a similar experience. I was really sick and I was feeling out of it, and I was on, I don't know the exact amount, but I was on NyQuil or something like that, some kind of cough medication. This might have influenced it a little bit. I was pretty sedated from being sick and all. But I was laying there, and in my mind, I was perfectly rational. My rational mind, I didn't feel weird at all in my mind, but my body felt like it was completely detached. I was just in my mind. Felt no feelings in my whole body, and I almost forgot it was there and just listened to music and just
Yeah.
drifted off and had these amazing closed eye hallucinations.
Well, I'm gonna be honest with you. Once you master lucid dreaming, I mean, everybody says that when I learn how to lucid dream, I'm gonna fly, or I'm gonna do something crazy like that. Man, like all those people are liars. What everybody does when they first find out how to lucid dream is they have crazy sex, and that's the first thing that I did when I learned how to lucid dream. Any girl I wanted to materialize her right there. But when you actually do get the point where you're tired of the fake sex and learning how to fly is very interesting. I would
Oh, the
never
nobility of
suggest,
man.
huh?
The nobility of man.
Yeah, the
It's in
nobility
our
of
DNA.
man, the wild fake sex of my dreams, man. But hey, man, it was worth putting my finger through my palm to have all the sex I ever wanted. But
So I've got a comment on that, Flav.
yeah, go ahead.
Now, I might not normally talk about this, but this is through the looking glass. Nothing is off the table
Nothing's
here.
off the table
I'm
here.
just going to go ahead and say that, I've never really had much dream sex, but there was one time, and again, I don't know if this was influenced from uh, over the counter drug use or not. I don't believe it was. But I had this one dream and it was pretty lucid. I had dream sex, and I came to climax, and it was one of the most significant moments of my life. Like, I don't even know how to describe it.
Well, that's very interesting. You mentioned coming to climax because
Please
I've
don't.
had countless hours of dream sex that it felt like sex for days. But I've never climaxed in my dreams. I've never actually
Yeah,
came to climax. It's
I think that's like the typical for people. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Like, they have like they start having it, and then they realize that it's a lucid dream, and then they wake up pretty soon afterwards. They're like,
Well,
oh
that's
shit.
something that as you master
Wow.
lucid dreaming, you start to increase your time lucid. So what like when I first started lucid dreaming, like I said, the first one I woke up almost immediately. The second one, when I became lucid, I could almost feel myself waking up. And I calmed myself down. And I was able to go for what felt like in the dream 30 minutes, right?
Uh, I feel left out because I used to just dream as a kid that I had an Xbox and I'd be bummed out when I.
Oh man, let me just get into like learning to fly in your dreams. So, this was a journey that I took over like 2 or 3 years in my teens. Probably about, 17, 18 years old, 16 years old. I don't do it anymore, but it was definitely interesting, man. I remember trying to learn how to fly. A lot of people always suggested just jumping out of a window. I was never a fan of that. That would never really uh, took off with me. So what I used to do is I would find a road and I would stand on the road and I would just jump. And what will happen is you'll hit the ground. And what I would do is I would just keep pushing myself off the ground and flap my wings like a bird, flap my arms like a bird. And sooner or later you got liftoff. And the thing about lucid dreaming is it's like Freddy Krueger, man. Is you can only do what you believe you can do. So when you start out lucid dreaming, you're pretty much just you're in a world that you can't control. But as soon as you find out that the spoon isn't really there, you can bend the spoon just by thinking about it because it doesn't exist. Oh my god, the things you can do, man. I remember like as soon like when I got proficient at flying, I could just I could be like, okay, I'm a fly, and I would just literally just it was like I can't even describe it, man. You just take off, go
See,
where you
this
want to go.
reminds me of H.P. Lovecraft. I think I've not read a lot of his dream stories, but he was at his happiest. This guy was a very dour, kind of miserable guy, but he was at his happiest when he was writing about his dreams.
Yeah.
And he had a whole ecosystem set up in his topics or in his stories. It was
Well,
pretty interesting. People were like kings in this other realm, and if you died, you could never go back. And there were people that were like desperate to go back, and it's a very interesting topic, dreams.
I've
well,
had a dream where it was so lucid and powerful, and this has only happened once, that it trumped over any other dream, in terms of lucidity by times 10. And I remember in this dream, I could feel things and see colors, and everything was pretty much as clear as day. Is this comparable to your dreams, Flav, when you achieved peak lucidity, or is it more still a dream state? You know, everything was foggy, just that you could control more of
Oh
it.
no, it was as real as everyday life. 100% as real as everyday life. I would say that it's different in the way that your body feels different. I don't know if you can relate to this, but when you're lucid in a dream, you're definitely, it's like, you know how in real life you kind of like you feel everything and you're very aware of where your body is? You feel less aware of where your body is in a lucid dream. You're kind of just like a consciousness, and you can feel the things that you focus on. The world interacts with you and looks like everyday life, indistinguishable. But once you get to a peak lucidity, you kind of start to notice that I'm not a physical body. I am a spiritual or mental body in a physical, or it's not a real physical world, but it feels like it. You know what I mean? That's how mine was. Now, does that compare to your experience or a little bit different?
Um, for me, my experience was that I felt more emotions than I would in the real world, and also that it was as clear as day. Like I
Mm-hmm.
mean that like visually, like I was self aware that I was having a dream, but it was as clear as day for some reason. And it was weird because it wasn't like exactly like my replicated world. So
Mm-hmm.
you know, it wasn't like I was having like some kind of psychotic break. You know, it felt natural and it wasn't like the same as normal. You know, it was, you know, sometimes like patterns or like bright lights, but just, you know, in terms of clarity, it was extremely clear.
Have you ever come into contact with what the lucid dreaming community calls like the dream police, which are like the other people in the dream with you that they become agitated if they find out that you're lucid?
No, the only thing I've had with lucid dreams is, you know, shortly after I become lucid, I just wake up pretty much. I don't have that much experience except for two dreams.
I mean, maybe I'm a little different in this fact, but like this is something that I spent years like deeply putting my time into, and the non-playable characters in your dreams, man, when they find out, and I don't know if this is just something about human consciousness because maybe you feel guilty about it, they will attack you if they find out that you're lucid, and I mean they're nothing to deal with if you're at a high level of lucidity because you're literally a god, but it's kind of scary because you can quickly turn into the enemy of your dream.
That reminds me of the movies Tron,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like you're not just another program. Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'll tell you before we get back to exploding head, let me cover one more topic. This was a while after I'd actually, and this is not something that you keep. This is something that has to be practiced every day to remain lucid. If you like when I stopped practicing it for whatever reason, I guess I just got distracted with real life. Um this was a couple years after I was in the back of a convertible riding down the road, jazz music playing, and I looked up in the night sky, and where the moon should be, it was the earth. And that I became lucid in that time, but it was a very short-lived lucidity because it freaked me out so much being back in that state that I immediately woke up in the middle of the night. But that was just something that stood out for me. Now going into what I was talking about that one night when I was really tired and I started to feel the sleep paralysis. I actually heard it felt like lips kissing my ears, and it was in a demonic voice, and it said "kill the child." Like really, like, and it was like loud and like a Thor, and I immediately just like broke out of it, and it was like, oh my god. Now, I mean, I immediately knew what it was. It was just a hallucination, but exploding head syndrome isn't another thing like that. You can look it up on Wikipedia. Is It's where I've only had this happen once. It's where you're falling asleep and all of a sudden you'll hear like a fuse like go and then boom. It's like a loud just explosion in your head that wakes you up. That's exploding head syndrome. I've only had it happen once, but it was terrifying even though I knew what it was.
I used to have the ability to wake myself up at any time in a dream just by like making my body make like motions or contraction,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever the word would be for like moving around your muscles,
Yeah.
whether there's like in your head, it feels like, it's coming from your head, but like just like turning on your brain more. I was always able to wake myself up at any time if I was in a dream, in, primarily a lucid dream, but in a way, pretty much any dream. Like if I was really scared, I could usually would just wake myself up.
Now, I'm gonna go into three things before I get off my soapbox about lucid dreaming. For people that are wanting to become lucid, the reason I the reason that I went through my thing with lucidity is, like I said, I used to have a lot of bad dreams, and I used to have a lot of bad dreams about being chased by things. And I started looking up, how do I overcome bad dreams. Well, becoming lucid was a way to do that, and that was like why I started to pursue lucidity. Is so when these things would chase me, I would become lucid and I could fight them off. Now, secondly, what you'll probably experience if you start trying to become lucid is sleep paralysis. It's very scary. If you ever find yourself in a state where you're in sleep paralysis, the way to wake yourself up is, most people try to move their whole arm or their whole leg or their whole head. That doesn't work. What you need to do, and what will wake you up the quickest, is move the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes and just keep wiggling them, and you'll wake up faster than any other method. Also, like you said, Lucy, if you're ever in a lucid state and you want to wake up, I've never had this really work for me if I wasn't lucid because I didn't know to do it. But what I would do to wake up from a lucid dream whenever I was done with it, which was very rarely because I always enjoyed the experience to be able to be a god, was what I would do is I would clasp my eyelids very, very tightly and then rip them open and do that over and over until I woke up. But that's my spill
That's
on
good to
lucid
know.
dreaming.
It seems like, like I said earlier, as far as the parks go, you got to stay calm, but there's going to be situations which are going to really test your patience with that idea.
Yeah. Lucid dreaming's definitely very interesting. It's worth the miles that you have to walk to achieve it, but it's also dangerous. I've read stories about people that forfeited on life because of lucid dreaming. They were, taking drugs to sleep 14, 20 hours a day so they could live the life that they wanted in their dreams. So it can also be an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Yeah, that's what Lovecraft, one of his themes was there were guys where they were using drugs to try to desperately like get into the dream world again. Instead of being a loser living under a bridge, he was a
Yeah.
king and respected. So it
Mhm.
consumed him.
So I have two questions to ask you guys. And the first question is, have you guys ever had dreams where you just wake up and you realize that that was a dream and that your life is shit and you just want to go back to bed and never wake up? And obviously,
Yeah,
Yeah,
once you get up
definitely.
and you get into your life and you realize that, you have a family and a life, you get rid of that thought. But when you're sitting there for 10 minutes and you're still tired, you definitely think that way, that you'd rather just go back to bed.
I've had two
yeah. I'll tell.
experiences like that, where one, when I was a kid, I dreamed that I was at Disney World and I had a lot of money, and I don't know why that was important to me as a kid, but it was. And when I woke up, I was very depressed. And one, when I was 18 years old, I dreamed that I had a girlfriend that loved me. We had a kid. I had a good job, and I remember the last thing I remember is we were out on the porch swinging. Our son was still in bed. We were kissing. You told me she loved me. I told her I loved her, and then I woke up, and that was very depressing because at that point in my dream, I wasn't lucid. This was just a regular dream. Was I felt contentness in life that in the dream world that I'd never felt in real life, lucid or otherwise. It was almost like in that span of time in that dream, it was like ignorance is bliss. I didn't know it was fake. When you're lucid, when you're having these experiences, you know they're fake. It felt so real, and I was deceived for just the moment that when reality came crashing in, it depressed me for a while. I won't lie.
Do you want to hear something more depressing than that, Fluff?
Yeah, what's up?
I have a good friend who's never had a dream in his life.
What, bro, man?
That's a thing. There are people who never dream.
I talk to people like that have like, I hardly ever dream. Dude, I dream almost every night, dude. Every
I
night.
don't know. I think they're just trying to be edge lords myself. I did want to answer your question though, because I did have a dream about a coworker of mine. I was very close to him. He was an older gentleman. He was like 30 years older than me. He was a sweet old man. Or getting there. And he was just a very nice guy. When he passed away, there were times where I had dreams about him, and it was so vivid, but he never spoke in his dream. It was always like he smiled with his eyes.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking that while I was dreaming of him, that I was hearing and imagining his voice. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't that the person in the dream was talking. I was just trying to remember him. And I'll tell you, that really would bum me out when that would happen. I'd wake up and it's like back to reality.
Well, I was gonna
So I
counter.
kind of,
Go ahead.
that's how I feel. That was to answer Snug's question. That, yeah, I've definitely felt that way. About like you wake up and you're just angry or a little disappointed sometimes.
Well,
So
I was going to counter Snuglington's question with a question on the opposite end of the spectrum. Have you ever had a dream that was so terrifying that when you woke up you felt like it scarred you for a while? Because I had a dream that I was on a battlefield with my family and a grenade, like a white phosphorus grenade, got kicked in, and I watched my brother and my mother be consumed by flames and burnt to the bone and like blood going everywhere. Their sternums were open, just being like burnt to a crisp, yelling, just screaming as I was fighting back. And when I woke up for that dream, I still think about that. Like it was scary, man. It was real, dude. It was crazy.
For me, I do feel traumatized for, maybe 10 or 20 minutes, but when I get up and I get away from that, and this applies to when you're awake and having a panic attack too. It's the same kind of a thing, or a PTSD episode. It's a similar thing. But after that time period goes away, I feel most the fear
Well,
that
there's a
arises in me
reason
is
for
gone.
that, and that's why when you're trying to pursue lucid dreaming, you keep a dream journal because dream recall is very important. Most people 20 to 30 minutes after they wake up and start losing what's called sleep inertia, they start to forget last night's dream. So that's why it's very important. First thing you do when you wake up in the morning, you immediately start writing down your dreams. And what that does is it trains your brain to increase its memory of its dreams and it increases your dream recall. Dream recall is very important for lucidity. But it's also a double edged sword because not only do you remember the good things, you remember the bad things, and that carries over as well. Any skill that you train can either hurt you or help you, and if you have a bad dream, well, it's going to hurt longer than it would have if you didn't have good dream recall.
Yeah, I think
sounds good.
there's a lot of theorizing that can be done about the cause of dreams, and obviously, your brain releases DMT when you sleep.
Yeah.
When you die too, and you can connect that. And people who do DMT, one fascinating thing is that almost everybody who does DMT sees similar images. I don't know what that's about, but we don't have enough time tonight to cover that. But
Yeah, we've gone over our hour broadcast time. So, guys, any closing thoughts other than we will definitely be revisiting the Vanishing International Park sometime either later this week or next week? Guys, any closing
No, I
thoughts around
look
the
forward
table?
to. Yeah, I just want to say that if you're going to go out into the wilderness, you should be very careful and be prepared. Take a knife, have
Definitely.
enough water, take some sort of food, and
Crucible.
just be aware that you're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah. Lucy, any closing thoughts?
uh, I try not to, and I would encourage anybody else to try not to live in fear and shame. Um, First of all, there's no point to it, and second of all, when you do finally die, you're just gonna, your brain is gonna be more uncomfortable than if you were at peace.
Okay, life is suffering. Pain is never ending. You can only become numb to escape it. This has been Through the Looking Glass with Avosky, Snuglington, and Slag Nasty. We will catch you back here tomorrow, 6:50 p.m., 7 o'clock p.m. Mics go hot. Until then, we are signing off.